Welcome to Patrick Scale Studio. My name is Patrick, and I'll be your host. This is build video number 2 for the finishing up of my SR-71A Blackbird in 1/48 scale by Revell. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. What we have here is me fitting on the front windscreen or windshield. And it's kind of a process that actually starts with putting the metal canopy in place because that is such a positive fit to the fuselage. And that windscreen piece kind of has a real loose definition of where it belongs there. The canopy is really going to help kind of line that up and get it into the proper location. So you can see I'm going to put this up here off screen so I can look at it at eye level versus flop my head down on the desk to look at it at that level for, say, filming. It's a little easier to get it in the right light angle. Alright, now that I know where it's supposed to be when it's lined up, I'm going to have to me a quick setting of the bin. Just let it do its work and pick its way in there. Now that that is cured in place and happy with where it's at, wanted to work on making it more of a seamless addition to the fuselage versus what would appear to be a separate part. That particular part was not a fantastic part for this kit. All around it absolutely looked like a little undersized without a very good positive fit. Yeah, for that matter, the canopies, both the front and back seat, or Pilot and Rio, those canopies are undersized as well, but because I'm going to have them in a raised position, it's a real concern for me with this build. If they were going to be closed, though, that would be a breaker for this kit. And then lastly, I'm just going to kind of go over this and I'm going to sand off the fuselage and kind of try to make it as smooth as we possibly can here. Starting off with 400 grit sanding spot, and then moving into the realm of 600, 1,000, 1,500, and 2,000, finishing up to 3,000. While it might not be 100% necessary, it's going to get rid of the coverage surface that fuselage parts have all around. Off camera, I went ahead and installed the Pilot and the Rio's office spaces here. They got the Quintus Studios detail sets on them rather than going with the kit detail. Kit detail is kind of bland, kind of plain, and the Quintus set really brings it up, especially on the seats. So, had to do that in order to prepare to get these two fuselage halves joined together. Some pitfalls here that definitely want to watch out for is if you've got anything down here, you want to make sure that the bottoms of these will clear because these recess into these locating areas. Additionally, the main landing gear bays nest into these right here. So you got any parts sticking through, I had a little piece of wire sticking through here that made that fit less than optimal, and it kept bulging up over here, so I shaved that down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of this Model Master liquid cement, and I like this for longer working time than anything like Tamiya Thin. Also, it'll go on kind of thick and goopy in here. I'll also put it in here, and we'll make sure that we get a great bond all around. Now, I'm not going to do anything up here just yet, but just down the middle right here. And the reason behind that is I do want to use the extra thin quick setting for this area right here where I can manually hold it in place while it sets up. For whatever reason, I found that the Revell plastic is not reacting very well with regular Tamiya extra thin. I've heard that before from other modelers as well. Plastic's weird, I'm not sure, but this seems to work. I've never had a problem with this working as well. So we will go ahead and proceed with getting these two pieces joined up. And you notice I've got 5 clamps here. I'm going to put 5 clamps here. I'm going to put 5 clamps here. I'm going to put a clamp there and there as well, just to ensure that we've got a good solid joint. Because I've already put so much care into sanding a lot of this surface back, so I get rid of this weird pebbly texture on the top and bottom. I did that before, just to eliminate any stresses on landing gear while sanding. So I went ahead and on these clamps I put tape down, so I'm not scratching up the surface and having to go back and do more sanding. Just using that Model Master liquid cement plastic models. I've actually used it for years, and it was usually my typical cement before even Tamiya's extra thin. And it's always been nice to have a little thin applicator. You can see here, hitting all the places where the two fuselage halves, top and bottom, are going to smush together and incorporate the ribs and that big center line strut on the landing gear there. Furrow clamping there is definitely going to be important. You can see kind of pointing to the internal structure where the two halves also come together. It's important to make sure that those are getting smushed together and getting the cement on each surface. Alrighty, for the most part, went ahead and got the Tamiya putty basic type put into place and sanded back. I've gone over this entire thing with sanding sponges, but for the most part, yeah, putty there, putty here, there, and there. So one thing I noticed that is nice about this one that is not nice about the starboard side is no seam there on the rudder, which will be great. Next step on both port and starboard side is going to be hosing these down with some primer, just to check for any further steps, lumps, sanding spots, sanding scratches, marks. Basically I want to identify anywhere that needs additional work, and go ahead and tackle that and address that before I get these put onto the main body. So there's going to be enough work on the main body blending this in right here to the main fuselage. As you can notice already, right here, this right here kind of softens, and that just happened naturally with sanding it out. So after this mates up to the fuselage, there's supposed to be almost like a U shape between this and the fuselage, and so with that being soft right there, that will not go as expected without some filler and a little bit of work. So I want to eliminate as much work on these as possible before I get these attached, because if these are attached on the fuselage, and the problem is there's only one flap right there that fits into this, it's one long fairly skinny tab that fits into this slot, then sanding this is going to be putting a lot of pressure on this and can disrupt that seam and that join. So I don't want to do that. Also, after these get primed, we identify any kind of further work that needs to be done. I still have to put some work into the starboard rudder in order to make sure, in order to address that gap right there. You can see that gap doesn't really exist inboard, maybe a little bit up there, but it definitely exists outboard, and that looks off. So prime, and then I got to get this one taken care of, and then these get joined to the fuselage. We conquer the join right there, and then we've got to put on the nose piece, and that will complete major assembly for this, and we can begin painting. Alright, here we can see the port engine nacelle, and most of the joins and fills I was able to get rid of successfully without showing up. There's still a couple problem spots here and there. I've already begun identifying some of those where a lot of it's just some of the Mr. Surfacer has started shrinking back and there's little holes or pits. So I use this to lay down that prime, the Mr. Finishing Surfacer 1500 gray, and this is what I'm using with a paintbrush to pick out individual spots that need a little extra filling or work. This is a little bit heavier build, so Mr. Surfacer 1000 it doesn't actually have a color specification. So you can see I've put a little bit right in there, got a little bit right there, and eventually I got to go around and kind of hit some of these spots where the exhaust nozzle meets up with the actual body of the engine nacelle. Additionally, it looks like I already missed something right there. This is from much more previously, 2 years ago actually, when I started beginning the build on this, and I thought that was clear, so it just kind of goes to show you how some things can shrink back given enough time. So I'll have to go back and hit that again, but all in all, the port side looks pretty good. Okay, so last filling, priming session went very well, and as we can see, all the spots that I had pointed out and I felt like needed filling, sanding, and priming, and filling and sanding and priming. Looks like that last session did the trick, and everything that I've identified looks like it's good and covered up. So that is the port nacelle. I will show off the starboard nacelle right here. Same deal. Everything here that got the filling treatment, sanding treatment, refilling, resanding, I'm happy with it. Is it perfect? By all means, no. Not perfect. But a lot of this is not going to be apparent at all with a black paint job. So with that, I'm going to put these aside, because the next thing we have to do for these is check the rudders on port and starboard and make sure that there's no gap and eliminate that gap if there is one there. And last we checked on the port side, there was no gap, but on the starboard side there was a gap. The other thing I looked at here was so I can put this upside down and not scratch or break anything here is I taped these canopies in place. Taped them in place just right now temporarily. I'm not ready to actually put any kind of adhesive down to put them in place while I paint, but yeah, just for now, a little tape so it kind of protect the edges there and these to keep it in place. I went ahead and got the forward section of this fuselage glued up. I had to put pressure on this for about 5 minutes, and the clamps won't stick to this just because of this being very, very nicely sanded, smooth, and slippery, and there's just nothing for the clamps to grip onto because it's not perfectly flat. But yeah, just holding this with some pressure and the Tamiya extra thin quick setting cement did the job. All the way up there, had more pressure up here, there's pressure over on this side and up here as well. So this is, after this goes off for a night, it's going to be ready to be sanded. The next thing I wanted to point out though was with his nose piece. One, I had to trim up the ends here just for this to actually fit on at all. And then two, put that in place, and it's not an easy fit at all. That's what we get. Look at that gap. The gap is awful. Top and bottom. Absolutely terrible. So I'm going to have to sort out what is causing that gap right there. That's too much of a gap to fill and for it to look anywhere close to decent. So what I'm going to do is probably see if I can sand off little bits here and there of this right here where it might be making contact with parts inside the fuselage, and we'll go from there and see if we can identify what the cause is and correct that so that we can make this fit as it should. So, be back in a second here with more information on this. Well, I managed to eliminate the gap just about completely on top. On bottom, it's better. I'm not sure what it is missing that is not allowing that to disappear completely as well. So one thing I might try doing is putting a little bit of plastic card in there, just some real thin plastic card, and sanding that down to size, forming. And then another thing that occurred to me here is when you've got a misfit like that, a lot of times you can get steps. And that is certainly the case here. There's a step. It was actually in the opposite direction on the bottom side. This nose piece here is slightly higher than the main fuselage. And if we flip it over, just the reverse is true. Main fuselage is higher than this. So in order to kind of correct that, what I did was, one, in order to kind of close the gap, I sanded a lot of this back. I just don't think the kit was engineered incredibly well so that this right here, when it was as it was molded, this ended up standing a little bit proud of this, and that shouldn't be the case. So I sanded a lot of this back right here. There is a channel inside there that you can see where that little protrusion there is meant to fit into. It's not a perfect fit though, and that's why I had the gap. Fairly sizable gap with that. And then the other thing, in order to be able to adjust this so that we eliminate that step and allow this to be clamped into place properly, is I sanded this back right here. What that causes is a loose fit though. There's now a loose fit, which actually I don't mind, and I might even further loosen that a little bit. What that'll allow for is to put some of this thicker Model Master liquid cement into there, and not so much of that will come oozing out when I go to clamp this into place to kind of get this to align as it should be. Because right now, if I just in place loosely, I have a step. If I put a little pressure on it, like from a clamp or something like that, the step is eliminated. It has to be clamped in place though for at least a good 24-hour period to allow this stuff to set and cure properly and to evaporate off, and for this plastic to meld properly. Because what we're looking for is a very much a solvent for this plastic on each of the mating surfaces so that it welds itself together, rather than just being a layer of adhesive between something. We want the two mating surfaces to intermingle with one another. So I'm probably going to sand this back a little bit in order to give a little bit more space for this to reside in there, so when I put them together, it's got plenty of room and it's not oozing out and getting all over the place and making a giant mess. And that's also a concern there if it starts oozing out and I've got material on top of this to help clamp it in place. I certainly don't want that to wick into any of the material or anything like that and leave a lot of surface damage on the surface here of our fuselage. It is thicker, so it wouldn't wick quite like the Tamiya Extra Thin, but it would still definitely do whatever it could. I mean, it's Murphy's Law, right? So what I'm going to go ahead and do is figure out a way I can get this clamped into place. My biggest concern here is making sure the chines right here are aligned. If those aren't aligned, that is going to stick out like a sore thumb on the finished product, and then it might as well just go and hit the garbage after that. So be back in a second here after I've got that kind of glued in place and got something set up here for clamping action. Okay, thanks. After thinking about that for a little bit here and kind of looking into how I might get this clamped on, I came up with a solution that works as long as this thing isn't bumped The biggest obstacle right there is, I mean, these clamps, they have little swivel tips, so they're kind of conforming, but because it's a hard plastic, because those little swivels are hard plastic, when they are clamping down on something that is really nice and as smooth as this plastic after so much sanding that I've done, they tend to just slip right off. So I have a 7000 grit sanding stick. I've got a couple of these, and this right here provides plenty of grip. Just enough grip where, one, it won't mar the surface and leave any ugly pitting from you know, any kind of grit on this, and then two, I can just, using some Tamiya tape, apply those to these little swivel pads right there, and I will show off what that looks like in action. Go ahead and raise this up a little bit. So go ahead and, because this is now a loose fit, I'll make sure we hold it, and I can put that in place, and put that in place, and voila. That is now holding that decently in place. And for the most part, it got rid of every last bit of step there is. My main concern, though, is of course going to be getting those edges. And I get those edges with some of this stuff right here, and then after I'm sure that those have cured properly, we'll go in there and kind of press one way or the other with some Tamiya Extra Thin until we can make sure that we do everything in our power to eliminate that step. For the most part, we're really good down here. Just a little bit remains up here in certain spots. So, right there, if we can avoid it and use some strategic or tactical gluing in order to completely avoid it, that'd be preferable, and then minimize the amount of sanding and cleanup we have to do. So I'm going to go ahead and get that cement process started here with these in place, and be right back here with another part of the project. Okay, back to the engine nacelles here while the fuselage dries. We'll go ahead and look at the starboard here. You can see there's a gap right there. That has to be dealt with. On the reverse, a little bit of a gap here as well. And mainly this is the result of sanding. Just sanding this right here so that this nacelle blended perfectly into shape and there was no steps or anything like that. One thing I might try to combat this on both sides is to sand this back here. This right here looks like it could be holding things up. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a shot first and see where that lands us. I'm going to put these aside for the time being. Be right back in a sec. And we're back. Managed to sand on either side of this, and then a little bit toward the aft of the rudder, aft end of the rudder, and well, it's still kind of a tight squeeze to get it on there. You can see that seam is largely gone now. And a little bit remaining right here, and largely gone over on this side too. So just a little bit of continued sanding on the aft end of the rudder here and there, and a little bit more test fitting, and I believe that gap should be eventually small enough to fill with the Vallejo plastic putty. Well, I'm happy to report that my clamping plan worked out just fine. The nose is now on. I put a little bit of the Extra Thin quick setting right up here up front. There is no smushing this down or anything like that in order to eliminate the slight step we've got, so there's going to be some interesting sanding in my future, but I'm happy to report that these are lined up nicely. And so sanding this to blend this in should be real nice and easy. I might even throw a little bit of that Vallejo plastic putty into this seam right here to kind of help, but overall, I'm very happy with how that turned out. And through sanding, all things are possible. Um, got this completely blended in, and I went all the way down to a 3000 grit sanding sponge. So completely. Okay, so what we've got here are these engine nacelles, and this is just a dry fit. Certainly not the worst fit in this kit, not by far. Not amazing either though, but that's how that goes on. That's the port side. I'm going to pull it off. And let's have a look at the starboard side. We've got to be careful here that I'm not smashing this thing down with these landing gear in place. Again, it just drives me up the wall that they manufacture these or engineer these in such a way that you have to put the landing gear on now, and you don't have the option to do it at a later time after all the paint and everything like that. It's just asking to get broken off. And again, not the worst fit so far. Let's have a look at the bottom. I mean, we're definitely going to need some filler here, but not awful. Put the port back on again. Alright. The port's even a little bit better. The port side is a little bit better here as far as having a good, fairly good overall join. So I'm going to go ahead and put this down and be right back. Okay, so I've gotten all of the primer off of the mating surface of this engine nacelle for the port side of the SR-71, and in order for this to set up and cure properly, because if you'll notice here, let me turn this around and put it on there, and I get it there and I get it in place, and if I let it go, it droops, and it's not supposed to droop. So instead, what we're going to end up doing here is letting that cure with this on its side. That should allow this to not droop, be in the proper position, and we'll let that cure set up and cure overnight. So I'm going to... Okay, major assembly has been completed. Just about everything is in place. A little bit of minor sanding touch-up right here. I'm not even going to bother with including in a video. Go ahead. I've got things masked. These are set in place using some masking solution. Got that masked. I've got this right here, the in-flight refueling point, masked. I've got the engine nacelles masked on the inside where there is silver. Everything is, for the most part, where it's supposed to be. The elevons in place. These required a little bit of work in order to get them to sit properly. Rudders are in place. You can see the gaps there that I had to fill with the engine nacelles. Alright, I'm going to take this off before it falls off on its own. Flip it over. Again, we can see the gaps that are nice and filled. Very smooth right now. I'm sure something will pop up after a coat of Mr. Surfacer 1500, but most of that work is done. And this is masked. And the wheel wells at landing gear have been masked off using tissue paper. along with the engine exhausts. That's right, folks. Just your standard tissue paper. I've found that if I start cramming it into place using some tweezers and then I wet it down with some water, it conforms and it actually develops a nice, decently resilient shell. Because it's paper, it's porous, so I'm not going to sit there and shoot paint directly at it from an airbrush, but this will do wonderful at keeping any kind of overspray off of what's underneath it. So that's why it's there, that's why it's in place. You know, frankly, as the kind of the only thing I could come to in order to mask this off, because again, the way the kit's engineered, you have to put the landing gear in place prior to getting all the assembly completed and painting completed. You have to put that there. So that right there is the best solution. At some point I was considering constructing a box out of plastic card to fit here, but this right here just seemed to work out really well. And just the disclaimer, it's not my idea. I got that idea from modeling forums here in a couple different places. So I take no credit at all for that idea, but it works so well in applications like this. So recommend giving it a try when you come up against something that is going to be very difficult to mask properly. But at any rate, go ahead and set this back up, right side up. My next video should cover, for the most part, finishing this project off. It's going to be priming and painting and decaling and weathering, and I hope to keep it within about the half-hour range like this video here. I obviously skipped over quite a bit in the construction on this, but there's other build logs of the SR-71 by Revell out there already on YouTube. This was more or less aimed at my goal to get some Shelf of Doom projects completed and out of the way. So hope you've enjoyed this so far to this point. If you've got any comments, questions, or concerns, any kind of feedback at all, please leave that in the comments section below this video. And until next time, stay safe, happy modeling, and thanks for watching.